us are struggling with the challenges in our work life every day. We need to find a balance, develop an effective communication with coworkers to achieve maximum efficiency and minimum stress. To help us achieve this, we have with us Erin Lee, a mindfulness coach based out of Singapore. She is known for her highly effective strategies where she has helped resolve these conflicts for people. Her list of achievements is long. Erin is a certified mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher from the University of San Diego. She holds a Master of Science in Studies in Mindfulness with the University of Aberdeen. She is a professional certified stress management consultant as recognized by the Institute of Motivational Living. Erin founded Take a Pause, a regular online mindfulness practice community, as well as co-initiated The Big Sit, a global community that inspires the use of urban spaces for collective practice of mindfulness and fostering good health. We are fortunate to have her with us today, and she is going to guide us how to go step by step to develop a mindful practice. Over to you, Erin.
Thank you very much, Neha, for the introduction. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session, and thank you for tuning in. So my name is Erin, and I'm primarily a mindfulness coach based in Singapore. And today I will be sharing on the topic of mindful communication at the workplace, and I'll guide all of us through a short meditation. And in my experience as a mindfulness teacher and a mindfulness coach, I've had people come up to me to express their opinions about mindfulness and meditation. And they have given me feedback that they feel mindfulness is a very selfish deed because it's all about shutting yourself out from the world and to just only find inner peace within ourselves. And we're really just pushing aside what we are supposed to take care of in the external world. And this couldn't be further away from the truth. In my work, we focus a lot on developing the skills of mindfulness and integrating these skills into our day-to-day lives. So we don't have the luxury to escape to some place of solitude and to just spend our days there. And we have to live in the modern world. We have to thrive in the urban setting. So how do we apply the skills of mindfulness? So today, in discussing the topic of communication, I'd like to bring in the perspectives of mindfulness practice. I'd like to share with all of you how we could communicate more effectively with one another from the lens of mindful awareness, from the lens of attention. So I'll be speaking quite a lot about attention and why it is so fundamental to understanding what mindfulness is and how it could benefit us in terms of communicating at the workplace. All right, so with that, I will be starting my sharing. Okay, so when it comes to mindful communication, whenever I ask people what mindful communication is, the first thing that they would say is, oh, you must really practice deep listening or active listening. So, and I would always follow up with this question: how do you know when you're in a conversation, when you're interacting with someone, how do you know if someone is really listening to you? So you can put yourself in the shoes of the listener. You can put yourself in the shoes of the speaker. And based on your own experience, you can just bring to mind now, what are some of the signs that someone may not be fully tuning into you? And of course, in today's setting, we're all very busy. We also live in a really distracted world. And so our attention is very fragmented, right? So it's easy for our minds to wander off. So how can you tell what are the observable signs? So it's not uncommon to see, people half listening to you and half, checking out their phones or fiddling with their phones. Sometimes when you notice their eyes glazing over, or that they may not be really tuning into what you're saying because there's delayed response, for example. So all these may be signs that a person may not be fully tuning into you. And we do know that this kind of engagement is so important for building good relations. So as a starting point, I'd like for us to reflect a little bit about attention and how we are paying attention when we're interacting with people, when we're speaking, when we're listening. Where should our attention be, and how do we pay attention to someone? So I'd like for us to just take a look at this picture over here that I found online that I thought was quite interesting. So this could be a typical work setting. You have a speaker and a presenter, and then you have a group of people who are supposed to be tuning in. So just take a look at all the different characters and all the people in this picture. So who is paying attention? Can we tell? Can we tell who's paying attention? So maybe we can start from this cluster of people over here, right? So you can see obviously that they are in a way quite distracted. So we can see the two people in front, they are conversing with each other instead of paying attention to the presenter. We can see this person over here might be paying attention. And then you see this man over here who is also looking at his phone and perhaps distracted by his phone. And then the lady at the back distracted by something beside her and she's looking away. Right. So this is quite typical of a work setting. And I find this is ever more apparent with Zoom meetings, right, or virtual meetings where you are very tempted to multitask and with with muting ourselves, with switching off the videos, we may not even really care if people know that we're paying attention or not, right? So, and of course, with in-person experiences, it's a little more obvious. And I found these two gentlemen over here to be quite interesting because we observe them to be quite different. So there's quite a contrast over here. You can see this man on the right who looks quite engaged with what the presenter is saying. And then this guy here on the left sort of has a more solemn and a more serious or maybe even skeptical look on his face. And I'm sure, as a presenter, when you are observing the people listening to you, you may catch these facial expressions, you may catch these responses from your audience, right? And then you have these two people right in front, and obviously they seem to be the most engaged, maybe because of the close proximity with the presenter. They look really interested. They look very focused. There's very direct eye contact, and from the non-verbal cues, you can tell that they're really interested in the speaker. Okay, so we have a variety of different ways of paying attention, or whether we are paying attention or not. And then a lot of times we may not also remember to consider if the presenter themselves are paying attention, right? So if you put yourself in the shoes of a presenter, where would your attention be? And how would your audience affect the way that you pay attention? So for example, would you only be focusing on the people in cluster 3 because they seem to be the most engaged with you, right? Or would you be addressing the whole crowd? And when you do that, when you open your attention to your awareness to the entire crowd of people, you get all these mixed responses. And are you still able to focus on your presentation content, for example, when you see that people are talking among themselves, when people are looking at their phones, when people are looking away, when you have skeptical looks on your faces, right? So this is really interesting, because when we talk about paying attention, generally we typically only focus on the word focus, right? We only think paying attention is all about focusing, and we kind of grow up with this understanding as well, as maybe as children, as students, adults and teachers are always telling you, just focus, just pay attention, right? Because naturally as children, we are quite distracted. So a lot of us also tend to equate being mindful or mindful communications with just focusing. But is focusing enough? Is focusing mindfulness? Is mindfulness only about focusing? So when it comes to practicing mindfulness, of course, it is more than just focusing. It is really about our capacity to pay attention and how much attention we award to something, and what is the quality of our attention. So we like to use this analogy of a spotlight to describe attention and how it can be used. So if you've played around with a torch light before, or a spotlight, you can see that when you shine your spotlight on something and you bring it really close, the edges of the spotlight becomes very sharp, very clear. So everything else is in darkness, right? So there's a very sharp focus on something, and sometimes you're really just paying exclusive attention on something. So for example, somebody would be paying 100% attention on their phone, and they will be oblivious about everything that's happening around them. So we call this an exclusive attention on a single object, and this may not be helpful in the workplace setting, right? So imagine you're really absorbed in something on your phone, you don't hear your supervisor or your colleagues calling out to you, and you're really not paying attention to them. Right? So mindfulness is more than just focus. So with this torchlight, with this spotlight, we can shift this spotlight around, right? So from one point of focus, we can shift to other points of focus at the same time. And our attention, like a spotlight, is also flexible. We can adjust the size of the spotlight. So we can widen our attention, like how we bring the torch away, and suddenly the spotlight becomes a wider, softer, and more diffused. So this is what we call an open kind of attention, a more open, wider awareness, where we capture more things in our awareness. And all of a sudden, we can perhaps capture everything that's going on around us, and we're suddenly aware of everything that's happening around us. And this skill of open awareness is just as important as the skill of focus, right? Where in the workplace setting, there could be many things going on at the same time, and you're trying to engage a group of people, for example, right? And this is when a more open kind of awareness would prove to be more helpful. So with this understanding, if we go back to this image over here, and let's zoom in on the presenter. So let's say you're taking on the role of a presenter, and you're presented with this particular scenario, this scene, this experience right at this moment. Where should your attention be at any time? Where would you choose to place your attention? Which cluster of people would you choose to pay attention to? Would you choose to only zoom in and focus on the people who are interested in what you're saying? Or would you also pay some attention to the people who are distracted, and perhaps you may want to take care of, re-engaging them again. And if you notice people who have skeptical looks on their face, who may seem to be disagreeing with you, maybe you want to spend some attention, some focus on clarifying some doubts that they may have, right? So there's a lot to take care of here, and having a single focus on something may not be that helpful. Okay, so that said, what I have just shared is basically an attention on our external environment. And what about the presenter himself in this case? Should he also be paying attention to himself? Right? So what is there to pay attention about myself as a presenter? Aren't I supposed to only pay attention to the people that I'm speaking to? So as the speaker, as the presenter, it is important to know what's happening inside you one moment at a time as you are interacting with other people. Okay, so for example, when you see that people are distracted, how might this affect your state of mind? When you see people disagreeing with you or challenging you with difficult questions, what do you notice about yourself? Do you notice emotions arising in you? And with these states of mind, these states of emotional intensities that may be arising in you as you're trying to speak, would you lose focus on your presentation content? Would it affect how you present yourself, for example, right? So not only do we need to pay attention to our external environment, at the same time, as a communicator, you also have to be aware of yourself internally. So this is quite complex. It's quite a complex practice. So I'd like to just share this in mindfulness. practice, first and foremost, of course, we learn to pay attention to ourselves, right? As a meditator, as a practitioner, when we meditate, when we practice mindful awareness, we first and foremost learn to pay attention to ourselves. And a lot of times, it's either the external environment that we're paying attention to or the internal environment that we're paying attention to. But what is additionally important here, or just as important, is to notice the relationship between the external and the internal. And this is something quite challenging, especially if we have an attentional issues, right? So, for example, when you notice things about your external environment, how does it impact your internal environment? And these are the four components that we usually practice being aware of. So our thoughts, the thoughts that may be arising from moment to moment. So for example, if someone challenges you with really difficult questions or disagrees with your opinions, and would you have, like negative thought patterns arising in you, right? And do you allow these thoughts to keep going on and on? When you feel certain emotions arising in you, how does it impact your external behaviors in terms of what you choose to say next, right? So this would come to behaviors now. So how does the external environment cause us or drive us to respond in some way? So would we respond with or react with a very sarcastic remark, for example? Okay. And in mindfulness, we also take care of the body awareness a lot. So paying attention to the body, because a lot of times we're just very lost in the headspace. So being able to shift our attention out of the headspace and into the body sometimes can give us a lot of information about what's happening. So when someone says something that challenges you or says something that that may not be very positive, how does your body react, right? What is your body telling you about your state of mind? So maybe you're feeling a little anxious about the way that you're speaking, the way that you're communicating, and how does that feel in the body? Do you feel like butterflies in the stomach? Do you notice your heart rate increasing? Do you notice the pace, the quality of your breath changing? So all these symptoms, these triggers, these signs are really important, and this requires us to be able to pay attention to ourselves and the relationship we have with our external environment. And speaking of thoughts, so often we're in a very cognitive space because we are essentially intelligent beings, and so we get lost in the headspace a lot. And with mindfulness, it's not just about paying attention to the body. We should learn to observe the state of our mind as well, paying attention to the state of the mind. And I'd like to just share with you some of the what we call thought patterns or cognitive distortions that may come up, that may arise when you're communicating, right? Or when you're interacting with other people, your external environment. So these may be quite familiar to you. You may have had these cognitive distortions before. So for example, magnifying stuff or catastrophizing things. So it could be that someone gave you a piece of constructive feedback, and we tend to react to it by magnifying things and think, oh, this is the worst that could happen to me, and I'm going to lose my job, or he's never going to like me, I'm not going to get that deal settled, etc. So this is really catastrophizing, like imagining the worst case scenarios. Another kind of cognitive distortion would be having a mental filter. And this has a lot to do with narrowing the scope of our attention too much. So for example, someone gives us a set of feedback in communicating with us, and we choose to filter out the positive and we only focus on the negative, for example. And then what makes things worse is that we can't let go of the negative and we just keep ruminating nonstop. So the same negative thought keeps replaying in our head over and over again. All right, so this is another one. The third kind is what we call fortune telling or assuming. So maybe you've only heard half of what this person said, and you sort of jump to conclusions. Oh, he must mean that, or she must mean that, and you sort of try to predict the future. Oh, he won't like me, or she won't like me. Okay, so this is looking into the future and making assumptions about the future without having the full facts. And the last one is an overgeneralization. Now, this one is quite common, and this one is not very easily detected. And sometimes it just comes out of our mouth quite quickly, right? Oh, he's always like that, or she never does this for me, and she's never like that. So we tend to overgeneralize things. So these cognitive distortions can get in the way of communicating mindfully and effectively. So in mindfulness practice, we want to be able to practice non-judgmental awareness. And what is non-judgmental awareness? Essentially, it is being able to pay bare attention to everything that comes into our senses and being able to detect, are we being reactive unnecessarily? Do we add on layers of perceptions towards something? And these layers of perceptions may not be the truth. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example now, and you could perhaps apply this to different scenarios of communications. So for example, you are speaking to your boss, your supervisor, or maybe even a client, and you observe with your eyes that this person is sort of stifling a yawn, or he's trying to hide a yawn. Okay, so this is something that you can see with your bare eyes. It is information that comes in through the sense of seeing. And when this gets processed in the mind, it's when perceptions come in, right? And perceptions may not be the truth. So we tend to perhaps further process it that, oh, he hates what I'm proposing. He doesn't like it. Okay, so that's when it starts. That's when we start to react, right? And having this initial thought, he hates what I'm proposing, may trigger emotions of anxiety, emotions of anger, emotions of shame. You may feel this in the body. You feel butterflies in the stomach. You have trouble breathing. And this perhaps affects the behavior as well. And you may shut down, your mind goes blank, and you start to stutter. So it affects our behaviors too, right? So it takes a lot to pay attention to what's happening externally, internally. And the key to practice non-judgmental awareness is to be able to detect these in time, right? In time, as this communication is going on, one moment at a time. And what we do is to learn to take a mindful pause at different moments of the whole process of this communication. So we could technically, take a mindful pause over here, right? So just before this perception comes in, we just stay with the bare attention of just the bare facts that this person is yawning. So before we even jump to conclusions with our perceptions, we just stay with this for a while and consider what might be a fairer evaluation of the situation. Or sometimes this process happens just so fast. You may also wish to take a pause as you notice this perception arising in you. So that's still not too late, right? So the moment you notice this perception coming in, oh, he hates what I'm proposing. Take a pause here and notice, oh, I'm having a perception coming in. Is this perception the truth or not, right? So what's really important is also what comes after this pause. And with things that are more cognitive in nature, I always like to remind myself to fairly evaluate the situation in a wiser way by asking myself 3 questions. So these are the 3 questions. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it necessary? So after you take a pause, or as you're taking that pause, you are allowing the mind and the body to return to a state of equilibrium, a state of balance. And this is when you can ask yourself very quickly, just process these 3 questions, right? This perception that I have, is it true? Right? I don't know if it's true. There are many possibilities. He could be genuinely tired, and that's why he's yawning. It could be just a physiological response. Is it helpful? Is this helpful that I'm thinking this way in this situation? Does it help with my communication? Does it help with my mental well-being, for example? And is it absolutely necessary at this moment to be processing, to be having this perception right now? Right? So while you're taking a pause, you can check in on yourself quickly with these 3 questions. So last but not least, I'd like to share with you the importance of attention when it comes to building good relations. And I'd like to share with you this study that I find really interesting. It's called the Good Samaritan study. It was a research study. So what happened was they got 3 groups. They got a group of theology students, who were studying the Bible at that time. So they split them into 3 groups. And for each of these groups, right, what they're getting them to do is to read a section of the Bible called the Good Samaritan. So the Good Samaritan is all about being able to help others or extend help to people in need. So they tell these subjects, okay, you have to read this part of the Bible, and then you'll have to proceed to the hall, which is a few minutes walk away, and you'll have to give a presentation on what you've just studied or what you've just read. So they broke them into 3 groups, and the first group, they told them, oh, you have plenty of time, it's still early, so really take your time and just take a stroll to the hall to give your lecture. The second group of students, they told them, you're on time, so don't worry, just make your way there. The third group said, they told them, oh, you're really running late and you don't have time anymore, so you better hurry. Okay, so what they did additionally was to plant an actor in the middle of the path on their way to the lecture hall. And this man would act like he was in physical pain. He was crouching on the floor and visibly in pain and needing help. So the study wanted to find out if the students would actually stop in the middle of the path to actually help this man in pain. So you may have some guesses on the results. So I'm just going to reveal them. All right. So it's not that surprising, actually. 63% of those who were told that they were still early chose to stop and help the man. 45% who were told they were on time chose to help. And the group that were running late, only 10% stopped to help the man. So one of the conclusions was that they ruled out, say, the factor of personality, right, when it comes to, or natural traits or dispositions when it comes to extending help. And really, there was a conclusion on our capacity to pay attention, right? And it turned out that the willingness to help someone in need was tied to how rushed they felt, right, at that moment. So you can see the more rushed people felt, the less likely they were willing to stop and help others. So there's a correlation between our ability to empathize with our attention, which is something that's so important in mindful communications, right? Especially when we know something like empathy is really important for us to put ourselves in the shoes of others, to be able to understand and to be able to work together, right? So, the relationship to attention is like that, all right? So when we're under stress, so let's say there's time stress or there's work stress, and our attention naturally tends to narrow, kind of like the spotlight, and we tend to just sharpen our focus on what's bothering us. So there's a lot of focus on the self-perspective, self-centered preoccupations, and it's a very selective attention. So we basically cancel out everything else that we deem not as important to us. And the other end of the spectrum is what we call an open awareness. So our attention broadens with open awareness. And this is a very spacious kind of awareness that allows us the capacity to notice other people, to be able to take in multiple perspectives, not just our own perspective, and to be able to extend empathy and compassion, right? So as in mindfulness practice, especially as we learn to rest in a widening and opened attention, our capacity to be empathetic also increases, right? So from self-preoccupied state, we can open up to noticing and tuning into others, and then empathizing, being able to understand, put ourselves in the shoes of others, and finally, to be able to extend our help, all right? So this is a spectrum, and it has to do with our attention, right? How broad our attention is. So, and of course, this does have impact on the brain, and especially with executive brain function. So I'd just like to show you, I'm not a neuroscientist for sure, but I've always found this study to be really interesting. So it's the relationship between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So the amygdala, so this is one of the most primitive parts of the brain that's about the shape and size of an almond. And this is in charge of our stress response, right? So when we're stressed, it drives the amygdala to react, and we go into like a fight, flight, or freeze response. So people who are under chronic stress, they get anxious very often, or they're in depressive states. It is shown that the size of the amygdala is larger than normal people. And with the consistent and effective practice of mindfulness, the physical size of the amygdala can shrink back to its normal size. Right. And what I wanted to focus on is the prefrontal cortex, which is right behind our forehead over here. So this is one of the most newest and most modern part of the human brain. And it is also what makes us uniquely human. It is also called the CEO of the brain because it's in charge of all the high level functions, like your ability to pay attention, your ability to analyze things, to make good, healthy, wise decisions, your ability to regulate your emotions, your ability to empathize and be compassionate to others. And all these are really fundamental to communications, right? Or mindful communications. So research shows that with the consistent and effective practice of mindfulness, the brain matter in the prefrontal cortex actually thickens in size, which means that it's a good thing because we're effectively using this part of the brain. Okay, so with the consistent and effective practice of mindfulness meditation, we can physically measure the changes in our brain, and we can, of course, in time be able to observe this in our day-to-day interactions and communications with people. All right, so for the remaining time, I thought I would like to guide all of us in a practice. The thing about mindfulness is that it can be quite intellectually exhilarating, especially when we talk about research studies, when we study attention, study the brain, and suddenly it's like you see light, right? Everything starts to really make sense and you get really excited about it. You're very interested in it. You start to buy books and you read and everything. And we need to balance this intellectual curiosity with experience. So we need to be able to practice mindfulness in order to develop the skills that we can employ in our day-to-day life. So practice is very, very important. With only knowledge, we will never be truly able to apply mindfulness to our day-to-day lives. All right. So I'd like to emphasize on the importance of practice, and this is what I'd like to guide you on today. I will guide a practice on both focused and open awareness. Okay, so we're going to start with focusing our attention on the breath for just a few moments, and then we're going to slowly open up and widen our awareness so that we sort of just capture everything that's within our experience from moment to moment. If you are new to mindfulness, don't worry too much about it. Mindfulness is for beginners. It's really for everyone. Everyone can practice it, and you don't need to be in a particularly quiet environment, right? So anywhere that you are right now is fine. You can just sit where you are, right? So we just want to make sure that our posture is wakeful enough and stable. So if you're sitting on a chair, I recommend uncrossing your legs, placing your feet flat on the floor. And if you're able to, you can actually cross your legs in a seated posture as well, right? And it's important to keep the posture as wakeful as possible. So keeping the back straight, but not too stiff. Relax the shoulders, and you can just gently rest your hands on the lap. So you can gently close the eyes all the way, or if you prefer to have them open, you can lower the gaze to the table in front of you, just so that you're not distracted by the screen. So you don't have to look at me per se. You can just listen and tune into the guidance. Okay? All right. So with your eyes closed or with your gaze lowered, let's allow the body to come to stillness. And then when you're ready, becoming aware of the body sitting here and breathing in and breathing out. I'd like to invite you to ask yourself a very silly question. How do you know that you're breathing? Which parts of the body are telling you that it is breathing? At which parts of the body is the breath most obvious to you? So you can just rest your attention at the nose area, paying attention to the flow of the breath in and out through the nostrils. You might also wish to pay attention to the movements of the breath in the body, at the shoulders, at the chest, maybe at the belly, noticing these parts of the body rising, expanding as you breathe in, releasing as you breathe out. So, one moment at a time, just following the sensations, the movements of the breath in the body. Allowing the breath to be natural. So, there's no need to change or control the breath in any way. From time to time, you might notice your attention wandering away to thoughts, perhaps, or to the happenings around you. And that's okay. All you need to do is to bring your attention back to the breath in the body. One breath at a time. And now, when you're ready, I'd like to invite you to take a deep breath in. And as you breathe out, gently widening your attention to the entire body in this sitting posture. Just getting a sense of the entire body, the overall shape and size, the sitting posture that the body has adopted. Noticing the space around the body, the air in contact with the skin. Paying attention to the contact points that the body is making with the chair or the floor. Noticing where the hands are placed. And from moment to moment, just allowing your attention to receive the arising of any physical sensations within the framework of this body. Maybe you're noticing temperatures, coolness, or warmth. Maybe there are sensations of weight, of lightness, or heaviness. There's perhaps pressure, a sense of tightness, or looseness, or relaxedness. Maybe even noticing heartbeat, subtle sensations like tingling, pulsing. So, one moment at a time, just be with the body the way it is. There's no need to change anything. And maybe your attention drifts away again. Maybe it's pulled away by a sound around you. Maybe it's distracted by a thought. That's perfectly fine. Just allow thoughts to be here if they are here. Just allow the sounds to be here if they are here. And gently returning your attention back to the body in this sitting posture. And when you're ready, let's take another deep breath in. And as you breathe out, very gently releasing your attention from the body, and let's further open our awareness to the presence of sound. So, one moment at a time, just allowing the ears to receive sounds. What sounds are present in your awareness right now? There is no need to know or identify what you're hearing. Simply know that there are sounds. You may notice sounds coming from different directions. Sounds that are further away from you or nearer to you. Sounds of different volumes and intensities. Sometimes maybe even no sound at all. And one moment at a time, we're just sitting here, resting in this stillness, and just watching the presence of sounds arising, fading away, arising, fading away. One moment at a time. And now, as we get ready to arrive at the end of our practice, let's take a deep breath in and breathing all the way out. And when you're ready, very gently opening or widening your eyes. And just taking a few moments to transition out of your posture. You may wish to stretch your body. You may wish to take a few deep breaths in. So thank you for joining me in this practice and with my sharing. I hope it was helpful for you. And if you would like to find out more about what I shared today about mindful communications, please feel free to reach out to me. And thank you, everyone. And thank you for joining me. And please have a good week ahead. Thank you. Bye, everyone.